A well-managed riparian margin can filter out many contaminants from farm runoff, and some of our native plants are especially good at this. Brett Robinson is part of a team from the Department of Soil Science at Lincoln University. He's working to identify native species that improve our landscape, remove contaminants before they reach waterways, and provide economic benefits to farmers using them.
The overall goal of the project is to incorporate native plants onto New Zealand farms for environmental benefit and also for economic benefit. We want to make it economically attractive for a farmer to put native plants back into his farming landscape, so it's a benefit rather than a cost. Roots of some of these native plants can actually take up some contaminants and transform some contaminants so they don't get into waterways. We have early indications that Manuka and Kānuku do interesting things with nitrogen and nitrates in groundwater, and waterways is a large issue in New Zealand. We've found actually some of these plants have pretty interesting properties. So other plants we've found can be used as supplementary fodder, maybe browsing, and they can provide essential trace elements to the animal, so it has a farming benefit. They can be used to intercept runoff from surface waters for shelter and also perhaps effluent disposal blocks. We've got a large lysimeter trial here in the greenhouse. We've got some field work going on as well. And the next stage will be to put in a full-scale experiment on a farm. This is funded through the Centre for Integrated Bio-Waste Research. So bio-waste means poos of various descriptions, can be animal, human, and so this is how the project's funded. We'd like to find out what are the most effective species for environmental and economic benefits on the farm, and perhaps also tell them about soil conditioners and supplementary materials they could add to improve the growth of these plants. There is actually quite a lot of native planting going on in Canterbury, and there's a lot of farmers have discovered for themselves that actually they can clean up the waterways just by putting in native species. At this stage, we don't know which species are best. We've got early indications that some are better than others, and I think there's a general enthusiasm to do this. We want to make it as economically as attractive as possible for the farmer, so it's not a huge cost to plant them. Poplars and willows could be part of the story, but we're actually discovering that some New Zealand native plants have really interesting properties that haven't been tested at all. And willows are generally known as a weed in the landscape, but that's not the case for all clones of willow, of course. But we're focusing on New Zealand native plants. And one of the interesting areas of research is that Manuka could be used for the production of honey to offset the cost of the operation of putting the plants in. Here we've got plants growing in small lysimeters, which are columns of soil, and we can measure the water that goes onto the plant, and we can measure the drainage that comes out the bottom, which would go potentially into groundwater or into rivers. We're looking for compounds in this drainage water like nitrate, which could potentially be a contaminant, and we're finding significant differences between species here. So these plant roots are actually modifying the amount of nitrate that's going through the soil and holding, in some cases, more nitrogen in the root zone of the plants. So in the experiment, we've got biosolids here, which is human poop, essentially, that's been treated. We've got urea, which is a common fertiliser, and we've got combinations of biosolids with sawdust, which reduces nitrate leaching. So we're looking at the transformation of nitrogen between ammonium and nitrate. So ammonium generally doesn't move in the soil, it's available for the plant, whereas nitrate does move and potentially can become a contaminant. We're also looking at the uptake of essential trace elements into the plants and see whether that could be a benefit or a risk to stock health. The other thing we're doing is measuring the emission of nitrous oxide from the plants. Nitrous oxide's a potent greenhouse gas, about 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide, and we've found that some of these species reduce the amount of nitrous oxide that's emitted from soil. While this is not a direct benefit to the farmer, it could help with New Zealand with its greenhouse gas obligations. We can say that Manuka and Kānuku in particular have a very interesting effect on nitrogen movement in the soil, and we've found early indications that Manuka reduces the leaching of nitrate and the emission of nitrous oxide. We're on the Lincoln University commercial dairy farm. We're investigating the rhizospheres of the plants. The rhizosphere is the part of soil that the roots interact with. And we have soil pits here where we're taking solutions of soil water from the rhizospheres of the plants, and we're seeing what chemical elements are present and in what form in this soil water. At the moment there is minimal interaction between this plot and the actual dairy farm, but it's the same soil type, and we can compare the soil solution here under the natives as the soil solution actually under the pasture on the dairy farm. There are significant differences in this soil solution chemistry and the rhizospheres of native plants compared to pastures. We've found that in plantings of native bush or native species we have a lot of New Zealand native earthworms, and these don't occur in our pasturelands, they've all disappeared. But these earthworms will affect the movement of nutrients and contaminants as well, and we've actually found quite a few that are new to science. These native earthworms are likely to be distinct from the European earthworms in terms of how they affect soil quality and the movement of nutrients.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.